Welcome to this week's Parsha Shiur, Parsha Tzav. Shorter Shiur than normal, given that there's the Haggadah Shiur later on, but it's a fabulous idea that I saw in the writing of Rabbi Emanuel Bernstein. One of the karbonos that is dealt with in Parsha Tzav is, of course, the korban todah, the thanksgiving offering. Let's take a look at the psukim, and then we'll explore what he says. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com or go to the website torahtoday.org. Says the pasuk, "V'zois Teiras zevach hashlomim asher yakriv l'Hashem." This is the laws of the zevach hashlomim. Now, the korban todah is a subcategory of the larger category of shlomim. It is a shlomim. Continues the pasuk, "Imal todah, if the shlomim that you bring is a korban todah, yakrivenu, you offer it up, v'yikriv al zevach hatodah chalois matzos belulos b'shemen." Now, the unique feature, one of the unique features of the korban todah is that it comes with 40 loaves of bread. There are 10 loaves which are chometz and 30 loaves which are matzah. But of those 30 loaves, they're divided into 3 groups of 10, each one slightly different. So as the pasuk says, chalos matzos belulos b'shemen, the first one are sort of mixed up with oil. The next one are rukike matzos meshuchin b'shemen, they're sort of smeared and anointed with oil. And then the third one is soiles murbeches chalos belulos b'shemen. So 3 types of matzahs and one of chometz. Al chalos lechem chometz yakriv karbon al zevach toidas shlomov. So then you offer up the korban todah, the actual animal offering, and with it you have to have the 40 loaves that accompany it. Which means that you've got that day and that night to eat it. You're not allowed to leave anything over until boiker. Now, there are 2 unique features about the korban todah. Number one, although it's in the category of shlomim, it must be eaten within a day and a night. That's pasuk tesvav. Ubesar zevach todah shlomav b'yoyim karbono ye'ochel lo yaniach mimenu ad boiker. You've only got a day and a night to eat it, as opposed to the 2 days and a night for the regular shlomim. That's feature number 1. Unique feature number 2 is that you have the 40 loaves to be eaten along with the animal offering, with the korban. That's psukim number 12 and 13 that I just read. Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. Now, next point of introduction. When do you bring the korban todah? So the Gemara in Brachos, Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis, says the following: Omer Rav Yehuda Omer Rav, Arba tzrichin lahidos. There are 4 categories of people who have to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, i.e., who have to bring the korban todah. Yerdei Hayom. The first is those people who cross the sea. They go on a ship, or they go on a boat, a voyage across an ocean, and they get to the other side. They have to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there for their safe arrival. Holchei midbaris, those who travel through the wilderness, through the desert. Third of all, Misha ha'cholev v'nisrapa, a person was sick and he recovers. Or Misha ha'chovesh b'beis ha'asurim v'yotzel, someone who was imprisoned and then was released. So those are the 4 categories of people who have to bring a korban todah, and of course it has ramifications today for we bench goimel, and those are sort of the headings of the type of situations you're in when you bench goimel. So that's the 2 points of introduction, the 2 unique features of the korban todah, that although it's a shlomim, you have a shorter amount of time to eat it, a day and a night as opposed to 2 days and a night. And number 2, it brings 40 loaves of bread. And the second point is that there are 4 situations which obligate a person to bring the korban todah. Now, why is it different? Why is indeed the todah limited to a shorter period of time to eat it? So the Seforno, which is often quoted, says the following. It's in the next box, of Rabbi's halechem. We've got a huge amount of bread, 40 loaves of bread, and you haven't got long to eat it. Making a person eat it in such a short period of time, says the Seforno, Yisfar Seim Hanes La'oichlim Rabim. You're going to have to publicize the nace to the many eaters. There's no way you're going to eat 40 loaves of bread in such a short period of time. You're going to have to get other people to help you. And when they're saying to you, why do you need me to eat this? What's going on? This is a korban todah. They'll realize that you've been through a certain situation, and therefore you'll be mispar seim the nes. You'll publicize the miracle that happened to you. Okay, so that's the famous Seforno. Now, there is an amazing insight of the Netziv regarding psukim that we say, please God, we'll say as Pesach approaches, we'll say regularly, and that is psukim from Hallel. In the capital of Mo Shiv Lashem in Perek Kuf Tezayin, We say sentences which we're very familiar with, and we sing it with feeling. But when we probe a little bit, there are some good questions we can ask on this chapter of Tehillim. The pasuk says, this is Kuf Tezayin pasuk Yuzayin, L'cho ezbach zevach toida of Hashem Hashem Ekra. What does that mean, of Hashem Hashem Ekra? You will call out with the name of Hashem. What does that refer to? Question number one. Question number two, Nedorai Lashem Hashalem negdono l'chol amay. You've fulfilled your obligations to Hashem, Nedorai Lashem Hashalem, negdono l'chol amay, which means you're going to sort of parade it publicly. Why? Surely one's Torah obligations are between you and Hashem. They're not normally paraded publicly. Why the insistence of negdono l'chol amay? Number two. And number three, the next pasuk Yutes, b'chatzreis beis Hashem, b'soichechi Yerushalayim halluka. That we bring this carbon taida, b'chatzreis beis Hashem, in the courtyard of Hashem, in the Beis Hamikdash, b'soichechi Yerushalayim, in Yerushalayim. I know where the Beis Hamikdash is. I know that the chatzreis beis Hashem are in Yerushalayim. So why are we adding these words, b'soichechi Yerushalayim? So again, like I said, familiar words, but perhaps three questions which need explanation. Number one, what does V'Shem Hashem Ekra refer to? What is the B'Shem Hashem Ekra referring to? Number two, what is the idea of Negdono l'chol amay? One's Torah obligations are between you and Hashem and are not normally paraded in public. And number three, the words B'Sochechi Yerushalayim seem difficult to understand why they're there. I know the Chatzreis Beis Hashem are in Yerushalayim. What is it adding by telling me B'Sochechi Yerushalayim? So there is a fabulous Netziv. The Netziv in Homek Dova, the Homek Dova was written as he gave Shiur. The Netziv, the Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, was the Rashi in Volozhin, and he would give a Chumash Shiur after Shacharis every morning. According to Barawine, it was only a small group of boys who actually attended it. But what a Shiur it must have been. And that became the Homek Dova. So on this pasuk, on Parsha Tzav, he says the following. It's the bottom box on the page. V'ha'inyan. The tachlis toida shebo al hanes. The whole purpose of the carbon toida is that it comes because of a miracle, like we said, the Gemara in Brachas on abra strichim lahodos. Kadei l'saper chaste Hashem shegomel olav, that you tell people about the chesed that you have received, the kindness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed upon you. Umitam zeh riba hakosov belechem umiyat bizman. And therefore, the Torah increased the amount of food you have to eat with the carbon. Shlomim you eat, some of it is burnt and some of it the bailim eat, but then you've got to bring 40 loaves of bread. So the Torah increases the amount of lechem that you have with this carbon, umiyat bizman, and it limits the time, it reduces the time. Achilas toida mikol shlomim. Like I said, the normal shlomim is 2 days and a night. So for example, you bring it on a Sunday morning, so you've got till Shkia on Monday for a regular shlomim, but the Toida, you've only got a day and a night, which means until dawn the next morning, and according to some opinions, until midnight. So that's not a lot of time to eat a lot of food. Hainu kadei sheyeh marbe reim lesuda. So the only way to do it is to invite a lot of people. Lesuda achas b'yom hakrav. On the day that you're making it, you invite a lot of friends and they'll partake of the meat of the shlomim, of the toida, and the 40 loaves. Of course, you give 4 to the kohanim, and you're left with 36. Okay. V'yasipur hanes lifnei rov anoshim. And therefore, you are going to publicize the miracle and tell your story in front of lots of people. Now, in the Homek Dova, there is the Harchev Dova, and which is like a footnote. And here he says the following, the bottom paragraph, V'hainu. Tichsiv b'Halal. He says the following. In Halal, we say, L'cho ezbach zevach toida, u'v'shem Hashem ekra, Nedorai l'Hashem Hashalem negdono l'chol amoy b'chatzros beis Hashem b'suchei Yerushalayim. He asked the questions that we just raised. V'yesh lehovin, hamayme she'yishalem nidrei neged kol amoy. This statement that you fulfill your obligations to Hashem, neged kol amoy, umazeh shvach. What's the praise? What's the idea behind it? V'hari Hashem dorish min ha'adam shi'atznei aleches imelikov. Doesn't Hashem prefer modesty? Doesn't He prefer more sort of humble walking and not parading your Torah obligations and your successes? V'su kasha, and further question is, Masha Misayim b'suchechi Yerushalayim. What is that adding? V'hari b'chatzros beis Hashem hu b'Yerushalayim. We know the chatzros beis Hashem, the Beis Hamikdash, is in Yerushalayim. Why are we going from the innermost sanctuaries of the Beis Hamikdash to the outer areas of Yerushalayim. And the Trey Milika Oma says the Netziv, it's really saying two things. L'cho ezbach zevach toida hu ha-karban. That is referring to the karban. Uv'shem Hashem ekra hu kol toida l'Hashem tzivokos alanes. You're breaking the pasuk into two parts. The first half of the pasuk is L'cho ezbach zevach toida. Yeah, I'm bringing the karban toida because of the miracle that happened to me. Uv'shem Hashem ekra, I am publicizing the miracle to other people. Ubi al havos karban nidri l'Hashem hashalem. Al hidoas b'shem Hashem negdon al chalamoy to beroivam sheyechlu imay matoyd yisupa ois hashkoch ois olav l'toiva. So if you turn over to the next page, I've broken it up and explained it further. In each of the three psukim, there are two phrases. The first phrase is referring to the karban toida, and the second phrase is referring to the sudas haidah. In other words, l'cho ezbach zevach toida refers to the karban. V'shem Hashem ekra refers to the sudas haidah. You offer up the karban, and then that you eat and you bring in the karban. But v'shem Hashem ekra, that's the sudas haidah that you're publicizing the miracle to many. Next pasuk, nedarai l'Hashem hashalem, you fulfilling your obligation of bringing the karban toida. Negdona l'chol amay, and you're telling the public, you're telling others about the miracles that happened to you in the sudas haidah. B'chatzris beis Hashem refers again to the karban, and then B'seichei Yerushalayim Haluka refers to the sudas haidah. So it's a fascinating parallel, if you like, that the first half of each of these three psukim refer to the karban, and the second half refers to the sudas haidah. So that answers all our questions. Why is it V'shem Hashem ekra? What is that referring to? It's referring to the miracle that you experienced and the reason why you brought the karban. So l'cho ezbach zevach toida, that's the karban, and then V'shem Hashem ekra explaining why you brought it. Why one's Torah obligations are not normally paraded publicly? Yeah, but this is the karban toida. Nedar Hashem hashalem. Good, you brought the toida. But part of it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to publicize the nes. Negdon alo chalamoy. How else are you going to eat so many loaves of bread in such a short period of time? But Chatzros Beis Hashem B'Suchei Yerushalayim refers again to that dichotomy, that on the first half you've got the karban toida, that's B'Chatzros Beis Hashem, and then you've got B'Suchei Yerushalayim. So a very beautiful netziv explaining all of these things, the uniqueness of this karban toida. Now, all of that, amazingly, is really an introduction to the Manish Tana. How? You'll have to tune into the Parsha, to the Haggadah, which is Mitzvah later tonight. That will be uploaded separately. But it's an amazing. It will open up the whole of not just Manish Tana, but the Seder night. So that and more in Mitzvah later tonight. Let's just share one more idea on this week's Parsha. An idea we mentioned in the past, but it's coming in a different angle. One of the features of Parsha's Tzav is that it contains one of the very unusual notes in the Torah. As we've discussed many times, that when the Torah is read, it has a certain trop, musical notes, cancellations about how we lane. And the most unusual note in our liturgy is, of course, the Shalsheles. And it appears 4 times in the Torah, 3 in Sefer Bereshis, and 1 here in this week's Sedra. Now, what's interesting is that there's a common denominator between all 4 occasions. Let's take a look. The first one this is paragraph 2, the first box. Vayismama, this is referring to Lot. Lot is sort of in absolutely he's confused. The Malachim are coming and saying, quickly get out of here because we're going to destroy Sodom. And he is deliberating because he wants to save his money. And the Pasuk says, Vayismama, he's sort of deliberating, he's hesitating. Vayachaziku anoshim biyado v'yad ishtay. And the Malachim, these anoshim, they grab hold of him and his wife, v'yad shtei b'nosov, and they take him out, vayanichuhu michutz le'er, and he's saved. Next one is in Parshas Chayei Sarah. That's talking, of course, about the famous incident where Avram Avinu dispatches his faithful servant Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak. Vayomer, and the pasuk says, Hashem Elokei Adoni Avraham hakri no lefona hayom v'aseh chesed Adoni Avraham, and he says to him, please, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's talking and begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please do a chesed with my master Avraham. And on the word Vayomer, he said that's another Shalsheles. The third one is in Parshas Vayeshev, of course, with Yosef. The pasuk says Vayemo'ein, he's sort of being tempted to do an Avera with Eshes Potiphar, and he refuses. Vayemo'ein, Vayomer, Eshes Adonov, Heinatin, etc., etc. And the fourth one is Vayishchat, Vayikach Moshe Midomoy, that he's shechting in the karban in this week's Sedra. And Moshe Rabbeinu was officiating before, at the beginning of the induction of the Mishkan, and then you have Aaron HaKohen taking over. Well, what is the common denominator? What is the Torah? What are Chazal, who make the notes on all the various words in the Torah? What are they trying to teach us? I think in the previous years we've discussed a different angle about the emotional turmoil about each person was going through at that time. But it's going through a slightly different angle in this situation. What we're going through over here is this. Each time is talking about a pivotal junction in Jewish history. Let's talk about it. The first one is Lot, a huge junction in Jewish history. If he gets this wrong, then it's going to have catastrophic consequences, because Lot, it plays a pivotal role. He makes the right decision, he goes with the Malachim and he's saved. He then fathers a child with become Ammon and Moav, and from Ammon and Moav become Rus and become David HaMelech and Melech Moshiach, and the whole future of the Jewish people. So it's a pivotal junction in Jewish history. The next one is Avraham Avinu sending Eliezer to find one of the Imohis, which again is the founding blocks of our people. So the success of Eliezer is critical because he needs to find one of the Imohis to build Klal Yisrael. The third one is Yosef, also a critical, pivotal junction in Jewish history, because if he messes up, then Mitosei of Yaakov Avinu will not be Shlema. Then the founding blocks will be shaky, and Yaakov Avinu will have to start over, and it just won't work. So therefore, there were pivotal moments. But what about this week's Sedra? This week's Sedra, Moshe Rabbeinu is officiating in the Mishkan, and then he hands over to his brother Aaron. The answer is that this is the beginning of Shevet Kohen and Levi, because Moshe Rabbeinu was meant to be the Kohen. He then was told not, but he's got to officiate for the first 7 days. He then hands over to Aaron HaKohen, and this is the beginning of all the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Mishkan, and then the Beis HaMikdash, and the beginning essentially of all the Avodah of the Kahuna and of the Leviim, and the split in roles between the two of them. So it's also a pivotal moment in Jewish history, and I think there are some important take-homes to this. One important take-home is that to realize that our actions have consequences. The Rambam famously says in Hilchos Tshuva, the bottom box, a person's got to realize that he is 50-50, that his, every moment, every move he makes could tilt the balance. And indeed, not just him, but globally. A guy does one Aveira, he could bring down not just himself, but the entire world. And cause devastation. Also mitzvah, but on the other hand, if he does one mitzvah, he changes it in a very positive way, and creates salvation and success for the whole world. So you see that a person has to see himself not just sort of living on a sort of a very tightrope and making the right decision, that it could be pivotal, but it's just not just for him, but it's just globally as well. So a person needs to realize that actions have consequences, and there is significance to everything that we do. There's a famous story of the Shlomo Hyman that one time there was a terrible snowstorm in New York. Just a few weeks ago, people got caught in a terrible snowstorm. The planes were grounded and everything came to a standstill. Well, decades ago they had the same thing. And Shlomo Hyman, the Rosh Shiva of Torah V'das, one of the great Rosh Shivas and Gedolim of the last century, he made his way with tremendous Mesiras Nefesh through the very snowy streets of New York, and he gets to the yeshiva, and it was a smaller yeshiva back in the day, but there were only 2 or 3 boys who were there in the Beis Medrash on this snowy day. People thought there was no yeshiva that day. Who could come? It was impossible to get there. And yet a couple of boys came, and Rav Shlomo Hyman stood up and he gave shiur with the same gusto and the same exuberance and the same effort that he would always do. And one of the boys afterwards said to him, Rashiva, it's just the 2 or 3 of us here. You don't have to shout and scream and do it with the same energy as you always do. And Rav Shlomo Hyman said famously to them, you think I'm talking to you? I'm talking to you and your children and your students and all the doros. Because Rav Shlomo Hyman lived with this realization that our actions are meaningful, there are consequences to our actions, that everything has significance. And sometimes we make these decisions, who knows where, we all have our Yosef and our Elazar, and with Lot, and with Moshe Rabbeinu, we all have these pivotal junctions and decisions. Just a few days ago, I had a friend of mine, a colleague of mine in school. He made a chasna, he made a wedding. His daughter got married, and his father, Dr. Gerber, who used to teach in Hasmonean many years ago, He's Kanai is nearly 90 years old. He's a very special fellow. So I sat with him at the wedding and I was talking to him, and I asked him to tell me stories about Rabbi Schonfeld. Rabbi Schonfeld was the founding father of Hasmonean, one of the remarkable heroes of the 20th century in his Hatzalah work, and his saved 4,000 people on the Kinder transport. He built Hasmonean and many other schools, and he's got tremendous zechuyos. And he was a young man in his early 20s where he was doing heroic Hatzalah work. So Dr. Gerber told me a remarkable story. After the war, he was a young man, Dr. Rabbi Schonfeld, in his mid-20s. He wanted to go to Europe to try and bring out all those young children who were put in monasteries and in homes, not in Jewish homes. So he went to Europe. He took a British Army officer uniform, and he was wearing that. He commandeered a jeep from the British Army, and he had a driver drive him around Europe, and he was going into homes and monasteries to try and rescue whatever he could, Jewish children, to bring them back to London, to England, and to their religion. And one time they were driving in a particularly dangerous area, and the driver in the jeep said, "I know you want to go over there and the way to go is right, but I cannot go right because all the area here is mined. There are landmines, it's too dangerous to go. I need to go left and we can't go there." So Rabbi Schonfeld says, no, I'm going. Rabbi Schonfeld was a man, there was no such thing as a brick wall. You just climb over it. And he said, if you're not going to take me, then I'll walk. And he gets out of the jeep and he starts walking across. And the driver shrugs his shoulders, okay, and makes a left. And as he parts ways and he makes a left, he hits a landmine. Remarkable. So that every person has their own pivotal junction in their own particular life. There we go. So that we'll leave it there, and Mr. Hashem, the Haggadah share later this evening. But just to summarize what we've said, we spoke about the Korban Todah. The Korban Todah, as the Gemara says in Brachos and Daladam Beis, Arba'at Shrichim Lahodos. And those are the four categories of people that have to bring it for the miracles that happen to them. The Rosh Hashanah is Chaim, Achola, Yored Yam, Yotzim Beis Asurim, and what was the other one? Midbar. And the two unique features of the Korban Todah is that it's eaten in a shorter amount of time, a day and a night, and second of all, that it requires 40 loaves to be eaten along with the carbon, 40 for the Kohanim and 36 for the Bailim, and there's no way he's going to eat that amount in such a period of time. The Sforno says it's to be mefarsem the nes. The question is on Halal, says the Netziv, what does it mean, all these questions? What does B'Shem in Ma'ashiv, L'cha Ezbach, Zevach, Toido, V'Shem Hashem Ekra, what does that refer to? One Torah obligations, why Negdon Ol Cholama, why are you parading them? And what's Pshat B'Suchech Yerushalayim? I know the Chatzros Hashem in Yerushalayim. Says the Netziv beautifully that there's two aspects to the Korban Todah. There is the carbon and there is the Sudas Haidah, the public thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for being saved, the miracle that happened to you. The first half of each of those psukim are referring to the Todah, the carbon, and the second half is referring to the Sudas Haidah that explains all the various questions that we asked. The second idea we said is that there are pivotal junctions in Jewish history, and the Shalsheles represents that critical moment in Jewish history, Pashas Vayera with Lot, Pashas Chayesara with Avraham and Eliezer, Pashas Vayeshev with Yosef, and Pashas Tzav with Moshe Rabbeinu, and the beginning of the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and before that in the Mishkan, and the understanding the importance of realizing that our actions have consequences, the significance of what we do. Shlomo Hyman giving Shiur on that snowy day, and Rabbi Schonfeld in the landmines. Wishing everyone a very good week, and in Hashem we should learn and live these lessons.